Hello to the world and to the kingdom citizens. I greet you in the precious holy name of Yeshua Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, who said in his word, John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Hi, I'm Dr. John Curry, Ambassador, Pan-African, and welcome to the Embassy of the Kingdom of Heaven on Earth. If you want to follow this podcast, please subscribe to JC Global Embassy TV 1. Ring the bell and hit the thumbs up button. Today's message is entitled, Are White People Crazy or Just Infected with the Disease of White Narcissism? Are white people crazy or just infected with the disease of white narcissism? I found it interesting as I was doing research on this topic that I ran across a minister, a psychologist that went to seminary to study concerning religiosity in the church and how to handle this issue of white narcissism. And by the way, this minister is a white man. His name is Ron McDonald, and he did some research back in September 1st, 2014. And after reviewing some of the things that he was saying, and I found out that maybe this could be a missing piece that more white people need to hear about. Again, as I say all the time, do your own research. His name is Ron McDonald, a white man. He was telling a story about him and his father and how he was admiring his father. And he went on to say when his father went to a particular place, I think it was school or college or somewhere, and his roommate was a black man, and that he didn't want to share the room with the black man. But his father finally came around and realized that, in his words, that the black man was more of a man than he was. But he was operating off white narcissism. So in researching Ron McDonald, I began to go in and to discover some things for myself pertaining to white narcissism. And what is white narcissism? White narcissism is a psychiatry term that deals with mental and emotional and behavioral disorder with white people. It is mental, emotional, and behavior disorder with white people. But I would like to add to the mental, emotional, and behavior disorder, I would also like to include in that spiritual disorder. Because what happens, white narcissism takes its name from a Greek mythology. And Narcissus was a young youth who became enamored by his own image. Some say that he saw himself in a pool of water. He saw his face and he became enamored by that, and he fell in love with himself. Sparring his own love of the goddess Eco, narcissism is defined as excessive admiration of oneself. Excessive admiration of oneself. Narcissistic personality disorder is a psychiatric diagnosis, is often referred to as the most difficult disorder to treat. And just imagine, and myself being a therapist, just imagine you have someone sitting down while you're talking to them, and no matter what you say, they are always right. That's that narcissistic personality. They have come to be in love with themselves. It is also a person who is self-possessed. A person that is self-possessed only think of themselves. They never very often think of anyone else. Everything centers around them. They are self-centered individuals. So they're self-possessed and they love to use exploitation of others. In other words, I'm above you, so I'm going to exploit you. That's what they think. I'm above you, so I'm going to exploit you. I'm going to take advantage of you because I feel and I believe in my heart that I'm better than you. It is a person who wants to be the center of attention all the time. They want to be the center of attention all the time, which simply means that they just can't be second place. They want to run things. They want to be a center of attention all the time. Everything goes through them and around them. You see, a narcissistic person or a group will never say, I'm sorry. He or she believes he is superior and perfect being without flaws. And this is why I believe some whites are still stuck in this narcissistic behavior, because that's why they can never apologize to black people in America who they stole and bought from the continent of Africa, now known as Al-Qaeda land. They can never apologize, because to apologize simply would mean that they're weak. To apologize for people that you have done wrong simply means that you're not in control. So that's a narcissistic personality. You know, they find it hard to pay reparations for the 400 plus years that blacks has been in America. So they choose to ignore it. They choose to deny it. They choose to not do the right thing, because they're driven by narcissism. And many times, narcissism can run as a group. It flows as a group. And when it flows as a group, you have a group of people that are narcissistic. And they kind of form tribalism together. They form tribalism. They operate in jingoism. And the word jingoism simply means might is right. And tribalism simply says they run in groups. So it's group narcissism. And there was a man by the name of Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was running in group narcissism, believing that he was supreme, believing that he was going to produce a master race without flaws. So Adolf Hitler wanted to produce a master race, and that master race basically had to be a race without any flaws. So what did he do? Adolf Hitler created a monastery that was called Lebensborn. And now they're known today as Children of Lebensborn, or generations after the Children of Lebensborn. And they had an SS Aryan trait. And these SS Aryan trait was blonde hair and blue eyes. And if any of the people that was at Lebensborn that produced a brunette or produced someone with brown eyes, those babies, I believe, was slaughtered. They was going for a master race, blonde hair and blue eyes. So Hitler was moving in that fashion because he wanted to produce this master race to show the world that white supremacy is supreme, that white people are better than any other group on the planet. So therefore, they hosted the 1936 Nazi Olympics in Berlin. And it was a Nazi Olympic because Hitler wanted to showcase his theory of white supremacy. And while getting ready to showcase his theory of white supremacy, history says that Hitler was sitting in the audience, I believe in a private area. And while sitting there, it records that he had his right hand on his right knee, and he was rubbing his knee while he was watching the game. And while watching the game, the announcer began to pronounce the particular events. And all of a sudden, Hitler saw Jesse Owens come out the blocks. And remember, this is all propaganda about the white race superiority. All about propaganda for the white race superiority, that white people at that time, Nazi Germany, those Aryans, were supposed to be the superior race in the world. So the announcer announced 100 meters, 200 meters, and several other events. And Hitler watched Jesse Owens win 3 individual gold medals. And I believe he won the 4th in a relay. But he watched this, and he was angry, sitting there angry, and he couldn't believe that these black athletes was dominating those particular sprints and dominating in the actual Olympic Games. So a reporter came up to Hitler and asked Hitler this question. The reporter said, "Hitler, what do you think of your master race now?" And Hitler paused and looked down. And when he looked down, after he stopped rubbing his right knee, he looked up at the reporter and said, "It is not fair." And the reporter said, "What do you mean it's not fair?" They was in the same starting blocks. They came out, they ran down the same 100 meters. They ran down the same lanes. What do you mean it's not fair? He said, "It's not fair." That's what Hitler said. "It is not fair for humans to run with animals." He tilted his head and put his hand on his hat and walked off and left the reporter standing. Now you see, what I want you to understand, that white supremacy is narcissism, and white narcissism is white supremacy. So Hitler could not find himself to agree that it was a fair race and that the black athletes won. See, whites are stuck in a generational loop of transmission of white narcissism. I want to say that again. Whites are stuck in a loop of generational transmission of white narcissism. And this transmission is transmitted with a wicked pathology, which whites believe. Whites make right and black make wrong. I think I want to say that again because maybe I got some of the words twisted up a little bit, and I want to be clear about what I'm saying. Whites are stuck in a loop of generational transmission of a white narcissistic pathology. Whites believe whites make right and black make wrong. And the reason why that's important for me to say that to you, because it's a looping. They're looping from generation to generation. Well, what does that mean? That simply means that white babies are not born racist. They're not born bigots. They're not born thinking that they're better. Whenever you see black kids and white kids and all other children playing together, they don't have a clue what skin color is, nor do they have a clue of how to be hateful. But when these children are raised by hate, that's what I said, they're raised by hate that is embedded in the generational transmission of a wicked pathology, they begin to transfer that pathology to their children's and their children's children. And before you know it, the looping, the cycle continue. And I believe this is where we are today. Our children are not born to hate. They're taught hate. White children are not born to hate. They're taught hate. I love children all over the world. When I see children, that something in me just lights up because I know they're innocent. But we have these perverted generational transmission of white narcissists with this pathology that are training white children to hate and not to love. Black children don't hate white children. Asian children don't hate white children. Hispanic children don't hate white children. Fact about it, no children hate each other. But why is it that when they get 9, 10, 11, and 12, that they're being introduced to hate, and they're being introduced to boundaries of, you can't be around this black guy, you can't be around this person? Well, I know the reason why the white use it, because they're trying to save themselves. Well, why are they trying to save themselves? Because they know when their little white daughters start to look at little black boys and little brown boys and little Asian boys, or their little black sons start to look at little black girls and little brown girls and little Asian girls, they're fighting for survival, for their genetic survival concerning the melanin that every other group carry but themselves. They have the lowest amount of melanin. So in essence, narcissism is their way of trying to protect themselves, but they went overboard. Notice also that you cannot put people in slavery without being affected yourself. See, what you do to others, you have already done to yourself. And as a result of that, you're living a life from a shame-based personality, a guilt-based personality, a depression type of personality. You see, God wired it for us that we must love one another as we love ourselves. So if we hate each other and hate one another, then what we're doing in essence is hating ourselves. So white people, as I open up with the question, are white people crazy or just infected with the disease of white narcissism? Now, naturally, I know that all white people are not crazy. It's like all black people are not crazy. But it's a question to stimulate your thinking pattern, to get you to look at things from a different lens. And when you do that, then you got to be honest with yourself. What I'm really happy about is that this white pastor, this white minister, this psychologist by the name of Ron McDonald is doing his own work. But white people want to blame everybody else for them not doing their own work. His father did his own work. He and that black man became advocates for bringing groups together and bringing race group together. Why? Because when you put down white narcissism, then you can see people for who they really are. Now, white people, you already know that you're not the greatest people on the planet. You know that. But you're trying to perpetrate that as though you are. You know you got a lot of issues. See, if you're supreme, you're not supposed to have issues. If you're a white supremacist race, why are you getting D's and F in your classes? Why are you flunking out of college? If you're supposed to be a supreme race, why are you addicted to opioids and methamphetamines? And why are you addicted to alcohol? Supreme people don't get drunk. Supreme people don't run around doing all this crazy stuff. So you know you're not supreme. You got issues just like everybody else. But your white narcissistic personality will make you think, even though you know you got problems, you're still better than the people that you claim have all the problems. So, understanding that, I want to know, white people, don't you see what's going on in the world? Can't you see that black people are sick and tired of this mess that we've been going through? Why haven't you as white people done the right thing? What's taking you so long? Are you worried about being a minority and now black folks and brown people are running things and you're a minority? Are you worried about that we can't continue like this here because we got to take our country back? Well, who took it from you? You still have the power. You still have the guns, the bombs and everything else. I mean, you're the one that's in power. So why are you feeling so threatened? Because narcissism is threatened when anything comes up near it. It wants to feel like it is the dominant. So what culture is narcissism? I mean, white culture in narcissism is a kind of depression. So many whites are depressed. They're suffering from pathological altruism, which simply says that the desire to help others while you are destroying yourself. The Word of God says that you shall reap what you sow. No lie will live forever. Truth crushed to the earth will rise again. So everything you're doing, white narcissistic people, you're doing to yourself. Even a slave master would have to go back in his room sometime and cry all night because he knew what he was doing was wrong. Well, how do I know that? I know that because Jeremiah 31 tells us that God had placed right and wrong in our heart. You cannot do people wrong without knowing it's wrong. But your narcissism won't allow you to say, I'm sorry. Your narcissism won't allow you to correct the matter. Your narcissism just wants you to just keep doing what you're doing and just think one of these days they'll get over it. And you hear sometimes these white narcissistic people saying, why can't you guys just get over this? Just get over it. Well, why can't you white people get over it yourself? Why you keep doing the same stuff? Why are you passing on this transgenerational transmission of a wicked generational pathology to your children? You're doing it because you're still afraid. You're still afraid of the melanin. And as a result, white culture is narcissistic, a kind of depression. Whites are infected with narcissism. And people like me need to call it out. But more than that, not just people like me, I think it would be even better if white people start calling out their own mess. You know your family members are racist. Even you may be a bigot, but you don't have to stay a bigot. Look at people for who they are. Look at the whole history of the United States and see that here's the people that came and built this nation and you didn't do nothing for them. You wouldn't do that to your own people. That if you have a business, you wouldn't have your workers working for let's say your workers working for 2 weeks and pay them nothing. That's not, white people, that's not who you are. That's who you became. You allowed yourself to become that. And as a result, you move in narcissistic personality for the protection of yourself and your own people. That's all you're doing. You're trying to protect yourself under the cloud of narcissism, under the cloud of white supremacy, under the cloud of all of these things, because you're in power and you feel that if you lose power, that everyone that you harm, everyone that you hurt is going to treat you just like you treated them. Black people, we're not wired that way, white folks. We're not wired like that. We're not wired like you. We're the first people on the planet. We move in love. We don't move in hate. You're the one that's moving in hate because of your narcissistic personality. And here's something else, too, that I think you want to hear. The white church is a haven for white narcissistic. It is a haven for white narcissistic people. So this is why white people love to go to white church. Very few may mix with a black church, but they feel at home at a white church because at the white church they get fed the myth of narcissism and get fed white supremacy using code words to let them know that we're still okay. To show you how wicked and twisted it is, white narcissism at its fullness is when you see a white Jesus. White narcissism at its fullness is when you see a white God. White narcissism at its fullness is when you see white angels. White narcissism in its fullness is when you see the whole heavenly host white. How did it become that? Well, it became that because white people still see themselves as superior to any group, anybody in the world. That's why it's that way. So the church is a haven for white narcissists. The white church is a haven for white narcissists. This is why they find it so difficult to mix with black churches. And if they do, they only come in there just so they can grandstand. Remember, they got to be first. They got to be out front. So they come to a black church to grandstand and want the black church to see them as Jesus. I was looking at some clips over in Africa, and I was appalled that even in Africa, in this time right now, 2022, there are still some black Africans over in Africa which have a white Jesus in their residence. See how sick and twisted that is? When everybody got any sense, know that Jesus was black. Period. But you don't see black folks running around in Africa with black Jesus, and over here in America, we know it, but we don't have to show it. But the insecure people will always have to show who they are. They always have to brag on themselves. So this is why white folks stay at white churches. And this is why the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, and I say, and many others say, that Sunday morning is the most segregated time in America, and it's still that way. He said it in the 60s. It's 2022, and it's still the same way because white supremacy do not want to be around anyone that they think is beneath them. That's narcissism. You heard me say, white supremacy is narcissism. White narcissism is white supremacy. Let us move on. Then you have these white woke narcissists, that knows no boundaries. Now all of a sudden you woke. In other words, you woke because you march with black folks. You do all of these things with black folks, and you consider yourself woke. Malcolm X said it this way. He said you have the northern fox and the southern wolves. The northern fox will be the woke ones. Back in the 60s, the northern fox, they're woke. They won't tell you directly, I don't want you to move into my neighborhood. What they would do is raise up the taxes in their neighborhood so you can't move in. The northern foxes will come to your house. They'll eat with you. They'll be at your birthday parties. They'll come out and march with you. They'll protest with you. They'll do all of these things, these northern foxes. They will be considered now the white woke folks. They woke. They claim to be your ally. But in the back, in the dark, in the corner, you know what they do? They vote against you. Why? Because white narcissism does not want to lose power. These woke people can also be racist people. They can be narcissistic behavior. And what you find out with these white woke people, they love to be out front. They love to get the pictures. They love the photos. They love to do all of this stuff. But when it comes to crunch time, many of them are not there. Now, I'm not saying all of that way. There are some true allies who happen to be white. There's some true allies who happen to be white. But many of them are just there for the show. So they can go back home and tell their kids, I was there with so-and-so, and I was out there with this, and I did that. But see, you got to take it farther than that. You got to make sure that you're out there passing laws. You see, for all you white woke people, I have a question for you. Since you woke, why haven't you got out of bed and did a march on Washington? Number white folks that are woke did a march on Washington demanding that the United States government pay black folks reparation for their time in slavery and for all the injustice that has been going on with white folks. All of you white woke folks, why can't you do that? Since you woke. A black person shouldn't be nowhere present because you woke. Not only are you woke, but you out of bed. You woke and you out of bed. Why can't some white pastors, I'm talking to the pastors now with your woke self and ain't doing nothing. Why can't you do the Christian thing and gather up 1 million white folks? Like the Honorable, like the Minister Farrakhan did. Why can't you gather up 1 million white folks with your Christian self? You saved. You say you love God. You say you don't hate nobody. Why can't you gather up 1 million white folks and have 1 million white people do a march on Washington demanding that, now you're Christian too, demanding that black people be paid for reparation for the slave labor they've done. That'll tell me you really woke. And that'll tell me you out of bed. But these little tokens of symbolism and trinkets and holidays and all that, and yet you still claim to be a Christian, do what a Christian or a believer or a kingdom citizen would naturally do. Why is it that black folks are always got to fight for what happened to them? Where are the righteous white people with your narcissistic self? Why can't you come out and do something? But see, you get mad at this video. You're probably pouting right now. Why could he say that? Why he responding that way? Because y'all ain't doing nothing, you white Christians. You're doing nothing but sitting by watching it. And then you wonder why I label you all the same. Because you're complicit. You're complacent. You do nothing for the work of black people. It's pretty simple to me. If you woke, white people, hold a march on Washington for black reparation. And it shouldn't be maybe 15 black people there if they want to show up. That'll let the world know you're woke. If you're woke, white people, why can't you make sure that your white brothers and sisters pass these laws concerning voters' rights if you're woke? So you're marching with everybody, you're protesting with everybody, and you go home and watch the news and just be so happy that things remaining the doggone same. You may be tricking everybody else, but you're not tricking me. I see straight through you. Get your woke self up and do something. So one of the major things that I've noticed while watching Donald Trump is that if you want to know a case study for white narcissism, all you have to do is just remember Donald Trump and watch him right now. The case for white narcissism is Donald Trump. He's a case study. White narcissists have the following categories. Grandiosity, that's Trump. They gotta be grand. And grandiosity simply means that I'm bigger than you and I'm better than you. We've never had a president to come in talking about the size of his hands is equating to, you know what that's supposed to mean. Why would you bring up something that is infantile as that? The size of his hands. Well, they talking about, well, he has small hands. Okay, why you have to over dramatize that? That's grandiosity. You want to think of yourself as somebody big when you're really small. Then you have using fantastic, or shall we say, fantasy distortion. In other words, you're distorting your reality. Fantastic distortion of reality. Like what you're doing right now. You lied to say you didn't win the election, and you're keeping that lie going on right now because you have distorted reality. That's Trump. White people have done that by stealing everybody else's history, and in particular black history. You know you didn't build no pyramids, and you know you didn't understand much of what you understand except through other cultures. You have to understand that black people are not stupid. We are not stupid people. We're very smart. We have a DNA series number of 9. Everybody else's DNA series number is 6. The pyramid didn't get built by dummies. The pyramid and all of that stuff didn't get built because black people are not smart. We're super smart. When you look at the city of Washington, D.C., it was built by a black man that had no design. He built it off the top of his head. Washington, D.C., all the pillars that you see there are all Africans. I know people like to say, well, that's the Greek culture. No, it's African. Remember, here's how you know who did what. It was the Africans, the ancient black Africans of Kemet, now known as Egyptians, civilized the Greeks. The Greeks civilized the Romans. The Romans civilized France, Spain, and all of Western Europe. That's the order. We was here for everybody else was here, but we don't walk around with egoism and narcissism that we're better than everybody else. All we're doing, fact about it, all I'm doing is responding and correcting the record. Why do I even have to be on a podcast to correct the record? Well, I have to be on a podcast to correct the record because white people will never correct the record, because when they correct the record, their history is diminished. So they keep pushing these lies to the world like somehow that they've done everything and they haven't. What I'm expressing right now is righteous indignation. As a pastor, as a man of God, as a Pan-African, as an ambassador for the kingdom of God, I have a right to express righteous indignation. All of these lies that's been told for centuries come from the root of narcissism, using fantasy and distorted thinking to just a reality. That's Trump. Needing for praise and admiration. That's Trump. Somebody got to always pat you on the head. Oh, you're doing a good job. Praise and admiration. That's group narcissism. If you don't praise me and pat me on the head, telling me I'm doing a good job, you're fired. If you disagree with me, you're fired. Why? Because a narcissistic personality has to always receive praise and admiration. The other one, exploitation and remorselessness. A narcissistic group or a narcissistic person can literally do somebody wrong and never apologize, never say, have no remorse. They just go to McDonald's, get a burger. They can do all kind of wicked stuff. Going back home and like nothing happened. For a narcissistic group, when they went over to Africa, they went over and they stole everything. They stole religion. They just stole it all. They stole culture. They stole everything. Stole books. Went to the University of Timbuktu, tried to steal all of their books, not knowing that the African was smart enough to hide the real books, the most important books, 6 to 8 feet under the ground. That's back in antiquity. They knew that the Europeans was come and try to steal civilization because they have not created one. They was in cave, just coming out of cave when the University of Timbuktu was built for hundreds and thousands of years. And they came over surprised. They thought it was a black and dark continent, but they came over surprised that it was a place of great civilizations and still is. So what did they do? They came back over in 1884, had a meeting at the Berlin Conference of the Congo to discuss how they're going to carve up Africa. That's all narcissistic traits. Instead of trying to adapt and learn and work together, they want to destroy it. Because to destroy it makes them look good. To live with it makes them feel diminished. And they're still trying to make black folks feel diminished, but we're not wired for that. We know who we are. Statistics says that black people have the highest self-esteem in the world. Our self-esteem doesn't go down because we go through some problems. Our self-esteem is wired to stay high because we have the DNA series 9. Everybody else have the DNA series 6. We're wired for this. So they have no remorselessness. In other words, they forget it. We're done. It happened. Let's move on. Remorselessness they don't have. I'm not saying all, but quite a few of them just don't have it. They don't know how to apologize because they see themselves as being greater than everyone else. And that's Trump. And the last one, the lacking of empathy. That's Trump. A narcissistic person will not admit that they were wrong, and they find it hard to have empathy for other people. But what I discovered, those that lack empathy always want empathy. They want somebody to coddle them and somebody to babysit them. They want somebody to tell them it's all right. And what white men and women are doing now, especially the grandparents and the great-grandparents, you're making your white children to become weak through your narcissistic, your transgenerational, narcissistic pathology. You're making your kids weak by not telling them the truth. You don't want them to learn their history because the more they know about their history, the more they will know about themselves. And anybody with good sense understand, until you first understand yourself, you will never understand anybody else. So the question is, are white people crazy? Or are they just infected with the disease of white narcissism? No. I don't believe you're crazy. I believe you're just infected with yourself. And until you come out of yourself and see the world as the world see you and understand you, you will continue to allow your children to be stuck in a loop of generational transmission of white narcissistic pathology. I trust that you can receive what I'm saying. And I trust that you can receive it in the spirit that I'm saying it in. It is about you as white people coming together, understanding that you guys have to work out your own work. You have to do your own work. You have to begin to look at yourself and say, no more. We're going to love everybody like God loves us. And when you do that, your children will know that you are a part of the human race and that you're not supreme while living in it. That you have to go along to get along with everybody else. And when you do that, God will begin to bless you, protect you, and keep you from yourself and your own self-destruction. I trust you can believe it. I trust you can receive it. In the name of Yeshua Messiah, God bless. Until next time.